Hello, good evening, and welcome to the monthly mystical. I hope you're all well this evening. Um, we've got some great stuff going on this evening. We have Paolo Summit. I probably said that wrong. I do apologise. And we're doing a talk about magic and ghosts. So I'm so excited about this one. And I have some. Hopefully, there's some friends here that will friends here, friends that will have controversial stuff to say. So I don't know. Let's see. Um, but yes, I'm really excited about this. This is a nice type of stuff. And before we carry on, I'm going to try not to cry, but I just wanted to give this dedication to Becky Belgray, who passed away last week. She did a couple of talks on our monthly mystical show. She did one about puppets and one about being an urban witch. And they're fabulous talks. Please do go and watch them. I miss her dearly. She was my festival and market pal, and we had some fabulous plans. And I really miss her. Anyway, so without further ado, let's get on. And I'm going to introduce our new person today. Now, sorry, I've got to get my head back in the room after that. So let's pause the music and let's get in. So welcome to the stage, Paolo. Good evening.
Hello, good evening. Greetings. I'm Paolo. I've been investigating paranormal for about 30 years now, one form or another, and practicing and making messes with magic for about as long. So I've been bringing my experience to sort of the two areas together and tend to work with paranormal investigation from a magic perspective rather than from a techie perspective. A lot of people use a technical approach. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's room for other approaches as well as we become multidisciplinary and learn how we're approaching things. So the talk I think will last about 45, 50 minutes. I think the rule is, I think Jacqueline would say, put your questions in the chat and we'll get to those at the end. So without further ado, shall we jump into the slides?
Okay, yep. I shall mute myself. Come back off. Please do say hello in the chat. That's fine, and put any questions down on the chat, and then at the end we'll get them all up and we will have a go. Right.
Okay, so yes, a magician's approach to paranormal investigation. I think the first point I'm making of my subtitle is, remember, it's not always ghosts. There are other things that go bump in the night. So grab a drink, relax. Please keep it all muted. And as I said, I will talk for about 45 minutes, probably a bit less than an hour it will be. So we should be good. So, okay, how I'm going to approach this. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about magic, really how I define it, how I work with it, and to show why I have a very experiential approach as opposed to an empirical approach. I'm very and not anti-empirical approach, but I find it doesn't work so well for me. When I've played around with things like thermometers, Gauss masters, EMF meters, and so on, sometimes the room gets hotter when there's something happening, sometimes it gets colder. So I don't think we have the tools yet to be empirical. So that's why I look at going there and having an experience and then analysing it afterwards. But I talked then about the kind of entities we share our existence with, ghosts and other things that go bump, and some of my experiences and conclusions so far. But as always, there's always more questions than answers, and I think it's a continually getting longer list of questions, and the list of answers doesn't go down very fast. So let's start with the two facts we have. These are the only two facts we really have of paranormal investigation. First of all is people have experiences. We don't know really from the experience what we're dealing with, but we do know that the experiences are there. You can look at every demographic throughout all of history, every country, every culture, it's regardless of gender, everything else. People have experiences. And each of us are the sum of the experiences. And as we have more experiences as we go through life, that changes, that modifies our worldview, but we are all the sum of all the paranormal experiences we have. And that really is it. There's nothing else we can say as a fact about it. A lot of it is all there still. There's theory, supposition, hypothesis. Some of that might be correct, but we're not able to prove any of that yet. So let's start with what is magic. It's neither Harry Potter and it's not Paul Daniels. And that really shows my age, as I remember when Paul Daniels was on TV. But there's two definitions of magic which come from magicians, the real kind. And these are often quoted. And the first one is Aleister Crowley, and he described magic as magic is a science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with the will. Dion Fortune became really probably a generation later than him. She modified it slightly, but pretty much the same thing. But she makes a key change to in consciousness. So I define magic as the art of causing change to take place in consciousness in accordance with will. I don't think these go far enough, to be honest. I don't think it talks about phenomena. I don't think it talks about how magic can affect change, how you can create sympathetic magic, how you can create abundance and things like that. But they're the two definitions which most people do start with. So I tend to take a more looser definition. And again, I modify it as I go along through life. But right now, I'm defining it as beyond a world painted by our five senses, there is a deeper underlying reality which we can only glimpse, a world with rules and denizens doing their thing. Certain practices bring us into closer alignment with this deeper world and allow us to perceive it better and make changes within it, which have a corresponding effect on the world of our senses. Or, to put it more succinctly, if we do magic stuff, things go ding. Magic is the art and science of making things go ding on demand. So how does this fit in with reality? I mean, it's if we look at physics, for example, we can't really fit magic into physics yet. People do talk about quantum models and so on, but again, none of it really makes any sense yet. So really, the way I think about that is as a metaphor. And as a metaphor, I'm a techie, my day job. And so when I'm looking at computers, there's something called the OSI model of computing. And you can look at that in detail on Wikipedia. There's quite a lot of detail there. In fact, that's why I need the image from. And the way it describes the computing model is it's layered. So you've got the basic layers of metal, wires, but the next layer is the actual bits protocols which make things talk. So you've got like your network, your data, how the electrons move through the wires. And it goes up then to a protocol which explains which explains and defines what the electrons do and how it becomes a message. Then you've got your session you log into, you've got your presentation, and finally you've got your application, your web browser, or your game or whatever you're doing. So reality is layered like that. And I think the same thing is there with how we look at a magical universe. Sorry, I'm just going to pause for a second. I can actually control the slides myself, so I'm going to continue doing that if that's okay. So So I'm not saying the magical universe works like a computer model at all. I think it works I don't think it works like a simulation either. I mean, it's very popular at the moment, the Matrix hypothesis, that maybe we live in the big game of The Sims. I think we are, but we can't prove it other way yet. And it seems that the science needed to prove it is a little bit out of our reach still. Maybe it always will be, just as it always was back in Plato's caves time. But the things we need to look for that will probably be mathematical truths. So we're not going to go down there today. But happy to discuss that if you know me, on Facebook and in various places. I'll leave some contact details at the end. But a different reality acts as if it's layers, and it's the communication between the layers, which is how magical effects do take place. So, for example, many of us might use a divination system, such as, say, tarot. We shuffle a tarot deck and interpret the cards we read. If we model the universe as a single layer, how can this work? How can the cards interpret, give us an interpretation of the universe? If we look at this from a layered perspective, we can look at how communication from deeper and lower levels might actually come forth through a process called perichoresis, which affects the layer we're living in, the layer we're conscious in. So my shuffled cards are influenced by somewhere deeper underneath. So it's not truly random, but they're made unpredictable, and then the predictability falls into it as my intention shuffles the cards. We still need to work out how this would work, of course, but I think this is a special of what is happening. So there's, other examples which I just said divination. Evocation by incense is another one, and this was good. This was big with the Golden Dawn. They would set up their ritual space. They'd light some incense and then invoke a spirit into the incense, and the incense would take the form of whatever they're calling. And normally it's just a fleeting thing. There's a very good example of this in a description of the ritual taking place in Herbie Brennan's Experimental Magic. But it doesn't have to be so dramatic as that. It could be as simple as lighting a candle. And when you eliminate things like breezes and so on, then you could also be saying, okay, why is it bobbing when I ask a question? Um, Other examples, there's a haunted location where you might find a pipe start banging. And again, a plumber would look at that and say it's banging because pressure is going up here, pressure's going down here, or something like that. But then the fact that it's doing this on demand when you ask a question, and then you can actually research the answers and get information out of it, shows that information is definitely coming from somewhere. We can call that a ghost or anything else, really. I think these things are very carriers to the communication. And I mentioned Woodchester Mansion here. I'll probably go back into more detail later. It's a location in Stroud. If you ever get a chance to investigate it, do. It's a fantastic place. And the hauntings there take a very complex layered approach themselves. So when you're in a location and it's quiet, you might be with a small group, you're doing a vigil, you might find things get very elemental first, but the layers and layers deepen and other things start coming through, again, as if they are carriers. Similarly, Andrew Collins has talked about the UFO phenomena, and he connects it to what Wilhelm Reich called orgone energy, and that seems to be a carrier again for other things which come through. So it is layered, I think. Um, and as I mentioned, the pipe example, it's when you communicate, you speak to it in IT, you go ping, it will ping back. Um, And as I said, there'll also be a mundane course of that pressure in the pipes or whatever, but that doesn't change the fact that it happens when you ask a question. A very good book I recommend for this is Barry Patterson's The Art of Communication with Gina Sokai, Capel Bad. I think it's quite expensive now, but there are second-hand copies to keep an eye out for. And he talks about going into the woodland. It's more psychic questing-y, but he talks about going into the woodland, and then you're looking at the meaningful signs, which is showing you're communicating with the location. So you might speak to it, and a flight of birds might just land, and so on. Another example was W. Butler's account of a wind rising. So this was one when before he was even a magician, really, he was still learning. And he was sitting and he was outside basically playing, and he just calls things, and the wind rises again. The wind is a natural phenomenon, of course. Pressure's rising somewhere, it's dropping somewhere else, and it moves. But that it does it on demand. It does it when you speak to it, and it speaks back. I think it's what's very telling. And I think this is very telling when it comes to looking at how a paranormal investigation can be conducted. So really get back to traditional magic. I mean, there's various levels, various models of reality we use to describe these levels. So magicians, particularly Kabbalists, use the tree of life. And here again, we've got connections. You've got layers. Typically the middle pillar has got the 5 layers, starting with Keter and going down to the Malkut. But you've got side layers as well, and connections called paths between them. And these are often approached in a mental visionary state. So your meditation, you might have a vision starting at your base level where we all are the bottom. And then through meditation on certain symbols, you rise the planes to the different levels, different Sephiroth, which we're depicting here. Um, Sometimes it's more in line of psychology. And again, I mean, the tree of life, it's thousands of years old in one form or another, codified as we know it in the last probably 1,000 years. But then it's very much shaped on how human psychology works. So that's how that's pulled out. It doesn't mean the universe follows us, but then also maybe it does, as above, so below. Another way of modelling this is through the chakras, and this is more Eastern, imported into the West, very much post-Victorian times. And again, you have another set of layers, which again, each one has a certain quality, a certain quantity, which again, in this case, it's tied into human processes. So you've got the root, which connected to the world. You go up through sacral, sexuality, solar plexus, our sort of powerhouse, our furnace, the heart, love, the throat, communication, third eye vision, and the crown is allness. So again, it's broken the reality down in a way which that was understandable for that system. We go back to philosophy, very slightly pre-Victorian onwards. They had other layers as well: physical, etheric, astral, mental, and spiritual, and so on. So all these experiences, after the blend of these levels, as things bubble through from different depths. we have our levels, our model of how reality might work, or things communicating. So the next thing is, how do we get in touch with these levels? How do we pick up? How can we become aware of the things which do bubble through? And again, that gets down to what I think about what we call psychicism. And some people are born psychic. Some people can, have to develop it. And to be born psychic is not always a good thing. It's often a loss of control there. It's often a lot harder to actually sort out what's our own mental fluff versus things coming through. So sometimes, you need to really work about when a person first joins a magical school, they often shut people all the way down and then make them open it up again gradually so they learn to control it. But you do not need to be psychic to be a magician. This can be useful in some ways. It can be a hindrance in others. I mean, Blondie, he's notorious for being a very good magician, but he also employed a psychic, Edward Kelly, to actually help him make sense of the visions themselves. And you don't need a full, psychic sensorama to be effective. Sometimes a sense of something is really good. That's all you need. You can feel when something is there. You might get words popping into your head. You might get very subtle things. It won't be something like Hollywood would project, unfortunately. And there are many ways to start working on this. The easiest way is go on ghost investigations, put your equipment aside, and just sit and see what you feel, and just work on that. And after some time doing that, you'll find you'll start picking up on things and feeling things and trusting what you're feeling. You can also push it along a little bit faster with a daily practice. And a lot of magical schools give you something where you start off with a personal banishing, and then you might do something like a middle pillar exercise, working with a tree of life I showed you, or with the chakras, just visualizing each one in turn and raising energy through them. But experience is really all you need, and the more you do, the better it gets. So you often find that people might go for first three investigations, nothing happens. Then you get in the feel of it, and then when you have the feel of it, you're actually picking up on stuff, and then you just go with the flow. So that's really the next important key thing, is to go with the flow. We all tend to be very left-brained and want to be analytical. This was John Dee's problem. John Dee did actually report visions and spirits. He used to note that when he had the whole board active and so on, he would see a light coming from the crystal going to Edward Kelly's brain. So he was psychic. He could certainly see things which obviously weren't happening in a physical sense. But he was so in his own head. He was so questioning. He was trying to analyse and be analytical about it. So he couldn't really be in that sort of relaxed visionary state at the same time. The time to do this is afterwards. Pay attention to what's happening, make a note of what's happening, but then think about it afterwards. And then when you've done it, when you've finished, then you could be critical, you could be skeptical, or you could say this happened or this didn't happen, or maybe it was a physical phenomenon which did something else and it was a mistake, or in UFO terms, a weather balloon. But do that afterwards, not during. Now, the thing was said about Crowley as D, really. Crowley was in his own head all the time. He was very analytical, very mathematical. And so he used to employ Scarlet Woman. He was very dodgy. He used to drug them all up, with drugs, with sex, and whatever, get them a very out of a head state, call a spirit, and then see what came through. It's not that responsible, but it worked for him. And assuming it's voluntary, it's fair business, really. I mentioned briefly I don't use tech. This really, what I said in my previous slides, is one of the reasons why I don't use tech, because it tends to get in the way of actually, being free-form and it just happening in your head. If you're focused on reading the telemetry of whatever your tools you're using, you're focusing on that, and you're focusing on, the temperature going up or EMF fields or whatever. You're not focusing on what's going on in your head and what you're picking up and it's trying to get across into your conscious brain. These things are really subtle. It takes time to come forth. You might find it's happening, and then you might find that you're doing it all the time, then you become aware of it. So it's trying to sort of bring the distractions down to a minimum, relax as much as you can, and see what happens. And this will then create a feedback loop. So then the more you do this, the more sensitive you'll become, the more you are aware of what you're looking for, and then you can sort of find that state and pull out a strand of it and work with it. A little bit again to another aspect of ghosts before we start getting into how to do this. There's lots of ghost photographs out there, and there's a classic one here which I remember from all the books growing up in the 70s and 80s. And this one was particularly frightening at the time. I always used to turn the page, see this picture, turn it over quickly, and then go back and have a good look at it. And this is like 11 at night, 2 in the morning when I was reading. And we see a lot of these images, and a lot of really good ones in the past. And over years, a lot of these have been debunked. I'm not going to go into ghost photography too much today, but I think some of the debunking can be a bit over enthusiastic, and there's space for another look. But, some of these images are definitely problematical. The size of this figure here is certainly too tall for what it could be. And I do think there are some genuine ghost photos. I mean, this one we see here was taken in Michelin Priory by Kath Gearing, who was president of the Ghost Club at the time. Now, she was not faking anything, beyond a doubt. I saw the picture on her camera. I was at that investigation, but not there when the picture was taken. But I certainly saw the picture on her camera. Again, that's not proof, but I know the person. It's enough for me. Yeah? So I think this one's a genuine image. There's more details about it on the, if you go to the Ghost Club webpage, it's all recorded there. I'm only really interested in full apparitions and images. I don't get interested in orbs. It's basically just smears and strange lights and stuff. There's not much we can do with those anyway. So I don't really go too deeply into that. There's weirdness that goes photography though. And again, it's the reason why I don't really take any photography on an investigation. I'll take a camera and photograph a place before and after, no problem. But it's funny, when you don't have any equipment recording, like cameras, you seem to get better results. Now, it could be because our brain is focused on what we're feeling, or it could be maybe they know. I mean, we don't even know how to explain that if it's true. I know there's always a taboo against graven images and stuff, and that's been as long as humans have been around. Yeah, people have never liked, having photographs taken. Some cultures believe it's taken a bit of their soul. Even as early as the very beginning, take a stick and some sand, you can make an image. Yeah, so it's hardwired into us. But it's the case, and we got to ask, why are EVPs fairly easy to get and fairly interesting still? Again, it could be because it's a misunderstanding and it's just a purely natural phenomena. Again, but there's some weird ones which do match. So why would images be very, very hard to capture? Why are sounds easy to capture? Well, the thing about EVPs is when you've got your dictaphone running in the background, you're not paying any attention to it. You're just leaving it going. So maybe that's why it works better. Whereas if you've got a camera, you're paying attention to it, you're choosing a scene, you're photographing it. So perhaps that's why some things work better than others. I think that needs a lot more research to do, but my thinking's really going off in that direction. I do accept that some ghost photographs are genuine, but I think we still need to understand the mechanism because ghosts aren't made of light in the same way we are, or reflect light like we do. So what's being recorded here? Other ways you can work with images in ghosts, and this is a technique I do use. This image here is a picture of Medea casting spells among Druid sculpture by Henry Ferguson, 1673, and it hangs in the White Room in Ham House in Twickenham, London. And it was owned by Elizabeth of Lauderdale, and we'll see in the upcoming slide what she looked like. And the picture here is, it was done on commission by Lauderdale, and it's clearly an idealised view of her. And using images, you can start using magic to attract ghosts. So what we did on this ritual, this picture here, always felt it was very strongly connected to her. I can't prove, but from a little bit of psychic questing around, I believe that the white room where it's hanging was a room which she used to meditate in, or whatever she did at the time. She was certainly rumoured to be a witch. There's links about her being associated with a group called the Sealed Knot, which ties in the magic and politics and so on. So a few of us were there on an investigation. We're going back, probably early 2000s. And we're in this room. Now, normally in the real world, I'd like to use a candle, but you don't have candles in stately homes. They get a bit upset, that sort of thing. And there was about 5 people there. And we sat in a circle, quite high darkness, just of the image being illuminated by just a torch being held up. Yeah. And we then all visualised walking through the picture. And spent 10 minutes or so just in meditation, seeing what images arise. And things were unpacking. We learned things about Ham House, which we never knew at the time, which, thinking about it, was probably obvious, but we certainly didn't know at the time. Like it had an apple grove outside. There were pictures and images appearing of tables and scrolls and parchments where people were talking and information coming through, which some of it kept out, which is very interesting. Eventually, we all came back. And the thing to note about it then is we all were sitting in a small circle in this room. It's quite a small room anyway, not much bigger than, just a living room. And there was a sense by everybody in there that all the ghosts in the building had come round to see what we were doing. And that was very, very strong. And at the same time, other investigators in other rooms of the house noted that they had no activity whatsoever. So that's definitely an experiment you can try. And it's fairly easy to do, fairly straightforward. And you can even do it at home. So no reason why I couldn't take this picture now and then meditate upon it and see what comes up into your head. Okay, so I mean, just a quick look at Elizabeth of Lauderdale here, you know, red-headed woman. Um, and again, you've got what she looks like here. She's a bit older here. And yeah, she commissioned a picture. She was so into this stuff, and yeah, I can't prove it of any facts, but this is what happened. Yeah, that was what happened. The other picture we have here is from a Marston archive, and the late Simon Marston, he died a few years ago, about 10 years ago now, and all his photographs are all online. If you just Google Simon Marston, you'll find them. And he took all these pictures during the day, but they're all infrared photography. They're all from haunted places. They're all from very atmospheric places. And you know, in some of his lectures and talks, he did talk about experiences which are in his books now. It's worth having a look at this stuff because these are all very good images as well to key into. If you look on YouTube, it's broken up into about 6-10 minute sections, but a film, The Haunted Realm, where he goes into the all the haunted castles in Ireland, like Leap Castle, and talks about all those. It's worth checking out as well. Okay, that's a first touch on how we'd use magic for ghosts. We'll go into more detail in a moment. So let's start thinking about what is a ghost. I mean, it could be anything. I mean, we all assume ghosts are spirits of the dead. We can't even say that really. There could be, some sort of recording. There could be, bugs in the human brain. There could be other creatures as well. Things we call fairies. If you look at the folklore and the literature, things like fairies and UFOs might be the same thing, or there certainly seems to be a lot of overlap to that. And other things too. We can talk about tulpas, we can talk about elementals, and so on. There's a whole ecology out there to explore. And so sometimes it's not always easy to tell where one ends and one begins as well. It's some researchers like Joshua Cutchin, looks at say Bigfoot and sees them as almost like forest poltergeists and the phenomena they have around them. You can look at say fairy lore and how people are sometimes believed to go into fairyland after death rather than in the West heaven and hell and so on. And things will often blend together and attract attention, especially if you're doing rituals. So, the headless ritual, which is sometimes called a bornless ritual, can certainly attract spirits and fairies in your location. And, if there's that time afterwards, I can tell a story about that. So, how do I do it? What do I normally use? I tend to use just a bag of some tools, which depends on where I'm going, what's allowed. Some people are iffy about Ouija boards and stuff. I would tend to take these as my basic tool deck. I'll talk more about preparation in a moment, but I basically a set of dowsing rods. I don't particularly like pendulums myself. I don't seem to be very good with them. Other people do. That's fair enough. But dowsing rods can be quite good with. In one investigation where we started using these a lot, you find you can talk to ghosts and get a yes/no answer whether it crosses or not, and you get it. But that was working very reliably. We did experiments where two separate groups asked the same questions without knowing the results of the previous group, and we got an 80% correlation, whereas normally it'd be a 50% correlation. So things like that are happening. Ouija boards, they have a bad reputation. With care, they're perfectly safe. But yeah, that's again another thing to unpick if the conversation goes that way. Candles can be quite good if you're allowed to use them. They're usually restricted in some buildings. If it's National Trust won't let you do that. Any stately home won't let you do that, and for a good reason. They're a bit of a pain to work with outside as well. They can keep blowing out, so you want to put them in a big glass or something. Tarot decks are good. You can do a lot of tarot decks. You can also use that to speak to a ghost as well. Shuffle the deck, pull out a card, and it can be what it's trying to say to you. But use anything at hand. Literally, it's as free form as that it should be. Then before I get to an investigation, first thing I would do is I do a meditation. Now, again, I go through periods of life I meditate every day, periods of life where I sort of don't do it every day. But I've spent years at a time doing it. And so I've built up what you might call an energy body, an inner body, based upon the regular practice. So before I do an investigation, I would always do that. I used to start using the Tree of Life, but nowadays I just use the chakras, and I find it just works better for me. But there's no better way to do it. It's just what's best for the person doing it. I might also take a tincture at this point. Now, again, I wouldn't drink before an investigation. I wouldn't touch drugs, but I might take just a couple of drops of a tincture in water just to sort of again help put my brain in the right state. So I make a fly agaric tincture. Often I make some every year normally, and that's good, very very good in connecting to woodland. And you can do this hours at a time. I've done it, 6 or more hours beforehand. Well, I've done a meditation at home, driven for 3 hours to a site, did the investigation, and driven back. And it feels more effective even in that sort of period of time. When I get there, I have a look around on my own and I take photos here, it's no problem. I'm just getting a feel of a site. Sometimes it's a bit of a health and safety thing too. If it's a building where it's a bit old, there might be doors opening up into nowhere and things like that. So you want to know where these danger spots are as well, and make sure that that is all in your head. Don't run for that door. Or if you run down that corridor, you might run into a brick wall. You find that in prisons, for example, they're made in some ways, like Septimallet prison is made where there's a corridor and then there's a little gap, and then you run down and then a foot in, there's a wall, and it's to make escape harder. Yeah. So once you've done all that, though, I tend to switch cameras off. It depends upon the group you're working with. If there's several groups on the same site, some groups might have cameras, others don't. But again, in the little group you're in, I tend to sort of keep it low if I can. And I know one time, again, go back to a previous slide, we were investigating Ham House again, and we're in a place called the Gallery, and we had about an hour's vigil. There was about 6 of us in the group I was leading. And a few of us wanted to use cameras, a few of us didn't. So we got a deal. But the first half hour, let's have cameras, do what you want. And we did all that, nothing really happened. Halfway through, sort of, call time, let's all turn our cameras off now, and just all sat down and just waited to see what happens. And it was all building nicely. You could feel the atmosphere building. You're starting to see sparkles in the air, which I know is partially the rods in your eyes switching on and off, but it was more than that. And there's also things like patches of darkness moving out, which again is more than just the visual phenomena, the optical phenomena. And it was starting to get very intense, and it was building very, very strongly. And so one person literally pulled out the camera, flipped it on, and took shots, and that just killed it dead. So yeah, I was quite displeased with that. But it's one way you need to have a discipline. You're not going to record this for the world; nobody ever has. But you can get something to take away for yourself. Again, as I say, there's all the common sense safety precautions to do here. You need a torch, that sort of thing. We won't go into all that. That's all mundane, everyday stuff. And you don't have to work at night. It can be atmospheric. It's good to be in quite heavy darkness. So working, in the night is a good thing. But a few of us are doing an investigation in Hellfire Caves shortly. You don't really need to worry about nighttime then, because it's going to be dark down there anyway. Yeah. Um, Also, don't be so self-conscious. Sometimes you might be speaking aloud into the air. There might be nothing visible there, but you're asking someone to make a sign. Can you please show if you're there? Give us a sign of your presence, that sort of thing. And you can be very self-conscious to do that. So it's always important to get around that if you can. Don't worry about it. No one's going to laugh at you. You're just going to sort of see what happens. You're encouraging it. And it likes to be spoken to. You need to interact for it to interact back. And then you start a vigil. Normally, it's the first thing you do. Just dim the lights so illumination is minimal. You can have it complete darkness. Minimal light is pretty good. So, it's a little bit harder in summer where there's less hours of daylight, but then it's also harder in winter where it's colder. So it's that trade off. But get comfortable and then just call it heavy darkness. Just see what happens. It's okay to talk in a vigil. Again, you might be speaking aloud to whatever's there. And you find if you talk about ghosts to people around you, just in a quiet, relaxed voice, it also has the effect of drawing things close. And you can even do this at home. If you're at home, dim the lights in your living room and have a chat and just see how you feel. See how you feel as things go. And if you live in a haunted house, see what the difference is. And I think this is something which goes back to very, very early days. And the human ability to sort of communicate is, I think, part of this. So back in the past, you might have a tribe of hunters and they're busy sitting around a campfire talking about how Bob was killed by a saber-toothed tiger or something, 2 weeks before. And they're sitting and tell stories about Bob, and they're sitting about his greatness and his deeds and how he walked down a mammoth or something one day, yeah? And then they start thinking, oh, we can feel Bob, and they're starting to pick up his sense. So I think this is really how this sort of thing has started, but back in deepest antiquity. And probably is the origin of how people started getting into things like evocation, finding out that talking to it is actually what you need to bring them. And you can do this in the kitchen with the lights on, but again, atmosphere does help. So, work with it and find where you're comfortable. And also find if you do this, also, if you find yourself uncomfortable, change the subject, watch a comedy, do something completely different, and that will dispel it so quickly. So, more than about magical protection. Again, there's no size fits all. Usually I don't bother with it. Again, I've learned how to clear and banish. I've get rid of any attachments and stuff. So I'm not too keen on suiting up too much because then it gets in the way of my own perceptions. And that way, it's definitely an inverse relationship there. The more protected you are, the harder it is to see things. But it depends where you are. if I'm investigating, say, a house where there's a spirit of a ghost who just walks past and does something, I wouldn't bother with anything at all. If I'm in a haunted asylum or, haunted mental health hospital with violent inmates, then yeah, I'd put something up at least, yeah. And I would again fortify my aura, if you like, by doing the energy exercise I talked about, and then just really making it feel like a shield, just to put that on. I'll also have in my bag some salt and iron, that sort of thing. Just things to sort of which are known to hold things back, which clear things. Yeah. And also, when you've done things, it's always good to ground. An easy way to do this is to stand on grass and bare feet. That's a really good way. It just gets you back down to earth. Also, eating is a good way, and you want a high protein or sugar food. So chocolate is good, but the only thing Harry Potter got light and fat, and as is cheese. Anything like that is really good just to get the digestion going, get your body working, sort of grounded down rather than in your mental state. And when you're on your vigil and you feel there's a presence, stop talking to it. Just stay calm, polite, and respectful. When you do this, you'll find that it becomes unmistakable. And if you might not be able to see it, you might not be able to hear it, but you can feel it. For me, it feels like an electricity in the air. It feels intense. You might also feel you've got physical sensations, often shivers up the spine, or even physical sensations. Back in Chapter Man that we were doing last year, there was something which was following us around all night with a group of about 6 people. And a lot of us at the time, when that particular presence was there, we were feeling sort of definitely a tightness around the throat. Not painful, but certainly as if someone was lightly holding you like that. Yeah. Um, Whether it was somebody who was strangled or somebody who strangled people was impossible to tell. We never got really much out of it. It didn't really want to talk, but it was there all the time, all night. Other times you might feel, chest pains, which might be because of the spirit, involved. Might have had a heart attack or something. Yeah. It's again, it's go with it, but don't be blind to the physical sensations you might be having. They can all be very relevant. And then when you're there in a vigil, you get a sense, then this is where you can start using the dowsing rods for tarot, flickering of a candlelight, and just find ways to make communication. Again, unfortunately, it's not like, Scrooge, but it just appears and gives you a message. It's a lot more subtle than that. But just relax and ask questions. Yes, no questions are the easiest way to do that. And again, normally my anti-tech, it doesn't stretch as far as an MP3 recorder. So you can just speak out your question and then you get the sense as a yes, no, speak that out, and you can record a dialogue like that. You might need multiple sessions. I mean, just keep at it. Normally, an investigation, if it's one of the booked ones, it's for a night, and then that's it. So if there's a place keep going back to it. If it's just down the road and so on. Behind my house, there's a forest. All sorts of stuff happens. So I go there whenever it's pretty nice weather and have a bit of a chat and so on, and just record what I get. But other times you might have to go to several places. Sometimes it's best to be one of the organisers because then you get at least 2 look rounds and you get a view of, well, let's try this place. We can do a bit of a quiet private vigil, and then when you go back officially, when it's actually booked in, you can then go there. But the more you do, the more time you spend interacting with a place, the more you'll get out of it. But also, when you are talking to a spirit, do guard your speech. Some things can be taken as an invitation very, very, very easily. Um, And, I mean, for myself, the last time I did this was, the last time I did this casually was just before the second lockdown. So it was, what was it, 1922, 1921? Oh, sorry, 2022, 21. And it was on a Saturday night, the 31st of October. So I'm sure we all know that date. And I live in Clevedon, and Clevedon Pier is supposed to be haunted. So myself and a mate of mine, we thought it was quite a warm night. Let's just go for a walk around Clevedon in the dark and just see what we pick up. Yeah, so we met up at her house, and we did have a couple of glasses of wine, and then we sort of just went for a walk and just got to the edge of the pier. They kind of got on the pier that time of night. It's all locked out. It was a still night. It was a fairly warm night, bearing in mind it's the end of October, and there was a sense of something that you could feel it. There was, there was the odd sign where we're talking to it. So it was a sign which was moving. And again, remember, you're outside, it could be a breeze. But, it was moving when we say, could you please make that sign wobble, that sort of thing, yeah? Um, anyway, we got a sense of something there and a sense of connection. And I said, without thinking about it, can I help you? And I think that was interpreted as an invitation. So we not much more happened really. So we went back to my friend's house, had another glass of wine, then I sort of walked off home. That was it. And that was on the Saturday. On the Sunday, I felt really odd. I didn't really work out why. And I spent most of my day thinking suicidal thoughts on my settee watching TV, which is completely not characteristic of me at all. Yeah. And I still didn't twig what was going on. So, okay, went to bed that night. Woke up in the night about 2 in the morning, rolled over, and a picture fell off a wall where I was lying about 10 seconds before. In retrospect, I don't think it was trying to hurt me. It was trying to get my attention. But you don't think that, but when you're shocked awake like that. So I sort of had the light on for a little bit. Eventually, cleaned up a little bit, went back to bed. And next day was a Monday. I worked from home, so I was in mental, work thoughts. So came downstairs, logged onto my computer, did my work. That evening, I went back upstairs to change the sheets because the picture fell off a wall, there's dust there, that sort of thing. Yeah, didn't want to stir that up. And when I was doing that, I realised, wait a minute, I thought something home, haven't I? And then it all became apparent. Then you could feel it because you're paying attention to it. Yeah. And my first thought was, oh no, I'm in a house of a ghost and it's locked down. Great. But yeah, stay calm. Went downstairs, lit a candle to my guides, asked for a bit of help, lit another candle for the spirit, these little just tea lights, and just called it. And really just talked it into, where it was, what had it done. It's almost got through its sense of confusion. And yeah, over a period of like 2 hours or 3 hours, it took for the tea light to sort of burn out, it slowly diffused, and that was it. No more problems since. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to research any more from that. There are a number of suicides that appear every so often, so it could be psychology and so on. But all I was doing these things worked. And again, with ghosts and with magic, that's really how these effects do seem to play out. So asking for a sign can be problematic. Guard your words, and sometimes a sign can eventually be pictures falling off a wall and so on. And as I said, I don't think it was ever going to hurt me. If I didn't roll over, it wasn't a falling. Maybe a different picture would have fallen though, but it was there definitely to get my attention. It was probably quite an easy attachment. It wasn't a malevolent thing. I'm sure if there was something really nasty up there, it'd be a lot harder to get rid of. Yeah, I'm not going to encourage people to do that. But things will sometimes go wrong. Again, it can be scary, of course. It's the last thing you want is waking up, rolling over, and having a picture fall next to you. Yeah. And normally they will fade on their own after a day or two. There's lots of sensationalist stuff in the newspapers and news about attachments stuck for life and so on after playing with the Ouija boards and so on. Normally it doesn't work like that, and they don't last very long. Not always, but normally. But the thing is, stay calm. Just work through the problem. Yeah. The good thing to do is, if you've got an attachment, you think, have a salt bath. That will clear a lot of things too. You don't have to have it. We fill a bath with salt up and stuff, and you can use any old salt. Just Tesco salt works. And the way I tend to do it is a bottle of water with maybe a handful of salt dissolved into it. I tend to stand it in the shower. So I tend to stand it in a sink of hot water while I'm having a shower because I'm a wuss and I like it warm. Have a shower and then just tip it over your head and just flush it aside like that. And you just clean yourself that way. And that tends to clear things. You can also ward your house if you think things just happen often. So the approach I do, it doesn't really need any magic. Take some red bags, just squares of red cloth. Put inside a quartz crystal which has been cleaned in a stream or in a salt bath or whatever. Some juniper, some garlic, and some hyssop essential oil, and tie it up. Then you just hang it over all the doors and windows of the house, all the exterior doors, so front door and back door. Yeah. If I had a fireplace, I'd hang it over the fireplace as well. Yeah, any entrance or exit to the house, and that tends to work. That tends to really keep things at bay. When you do that, put your bag together and then just say a quick prayer over it. It doesn't matter what your system is, what your tradition, just something to just say, I'm making this sacred, and then it will do that. As I said with the story I just told previously, when it goes wrong, just light a candle and just talk to it. And if you've got guides and you work in that system, just bring them in and get them to help you. And I'll stop you making too many mistakes. But also making mistakes can be valuable in the sense that it's how you learn. You don't learn by not getting anything. Yeah. So again, cautious learning. Yeah. This sort of activity does create physical effects. I mean, I've just mentioned, the picture moving. Um, it's the sort of thing where it's why I think it takes it more than just the early definitions of magic, where you're talking about, Aleister Crowley and John Fortune's changes in consciousness. That certainly wasn't a change in consciousness. It was a picture going bang to me, yeah? And normally it's benign. It really won't hurt you. Most of the time, I've never really been hurt by this sort of thing, and many years of experience. But it can be unpredictable, and again, you need to stay calm. And Kenneth Grant has given us terms to understand this, which is appropriate to investigating the paranormal as it is in magic. So this is something he calls a tangential tantrum. And he defines this in Hecate's Fountain. It's one of the middle ones in his three trilogies. And the way he says this, it would seem that all the successful magic manifests as a ricochet, a sidekick to group ceremonies, to routine lodge or temple procedures, or to isolated individual magical workings. I call its peculiarity a tangential tantrum, anomalous or otherwise. It does not appear to have been investigated by any previous occultist writing on the subject. It is probable that if a mechanism of a phenomenon can be surprised, magic would become at the last that which its exponents have claimed from the first, either as a science rather than an art. Experience, however, persuades me that such a surprise lies beyond the realm of measurement, in which case the kind of occult occurrences herein described will continue to remain unpredictable, and perhaps that is just as well. I mean, Grant likes the very traditional thing where we shouldn't necessarily be seeking these things out. And again, if you read Hecate's Fountain, there's some very hair-raising accounts of the things which went wrong after some of his rituals. It would never be as dramatic as that. And you've got a group of magicians, all very well trained, all practicing and trying to do these things. But the same phenomena does occur when you actually look at ghosts and doing things. Sometimes it doesn't always happen to be what you expect to happen. That could be a good thing. But, it just plays to be aware that sometimes it's unexpected, yeah? So I think Grant is absolutely spot on, and this applies to ghosts, magic, UFOs, any of the strange investigation stuff you can look into. But I think what the type of phenomenon you get does depend on person. I tend to get random, uncontrolled telekinetic stuff, pictures falling around me. Other people might get other stuff. So, this is why I don't always request a sign, because I don't want things falling off the walls too often. Other people might get flowers apporting and so on, and that's a common thing. People put that angel hair appearing. A good friend of mine who's more into the UFO side of things than the ghost side of things always sees meaningful graffiti, outside his house, next time he goes out. So he has one where his name and a UFO was above it and so on. And there's no causal link to what would create that. So there's something just bubbling through, yeah. Really, that's really what I've got to say about magic and paranormal investigations. Please do shout any questions or put them in the chat. And have fun out there. The whole thing is there to be explored. So thank you.
You put myself back on. Well done. That was amazing. Thank you. Brilliant. Let me just text in. Anybody got any questions? I've got a couple. What was so I went to a clothes shop. Where was it? I can't remember where it was, but it was one of these places that's got all the old, like World War II army stuff, and just it was packed full of old people's clothes and lots of World War II, World War One stuff, and everything. And as soon as I walked in there, I thought I was gonna suffocate. I could just feel it was like there was hundreds of them all trying to have a conversation with me all at once. That was how suffocating it was, and obviously I couldn't, because I wasn't trained at the time that to get any communication. But I felt suffocated. So do you think that was? Do you think that's my experience was correct? Do you think that was because there was lots of spirits attached to the clothing, or do you think I was just, I don't know? It was just a little shop.
Yeah.
That was suffocating.
There's 2 points to say about that, really. I mean, the first one is, yeah, definitely. I mean, any attachment to somebody, somebody they had a long time, it will maintain, it's hard to describe what it is, really, a vestige of what that person was, perhaps. So it might not be a ghost, it could be the echo of a ghost, yeah? But it's all there still, and that can also be a link then to bring back whatever it is. And I talked about layers of reality earlier, and the layer I like to use is one which is popularised by Dion Fortune and so on, very much from the Western spiritual schools. You've got a physical body, on top of it, you've got an etheric body, which is almost like an electric thing, and then you've got the astral body, which then goes off. And the Egyptians called it the Ka and the Ba, and those bits and pieces, yeah. And so what's attached to the clothes might be what we might call what was left of the etheric body, an imprint, but that's still a line going out there to whoever it is. So again, it's hard to say whether the original person has gone off now to another world, has reincarnated or whatever, but there's still that line. And that line becomes the essential them, which then can reanimate whatever echo is left on the clothes. So it certainly could be. And again, there's lots of clothes there, then you're going to get lots of things. Yeah, I mean, museums probably give you similar effects if you play around in some places of those. But the other thing with clothes is a lot of people do this in investigations, and they might dress up in clothes fit into the time, and then use that to get another contact, to be familiar to whatever might be there. So you go into a place where, say, there was American soldiers stationed during the Second World War or something, you might wear an American soldier's uniform and then walk through and see what happens. Yeah. That sort of thing is always there. I mean, again, it's a pain to get that sort of level of clothes. It's sometimes not the amount of work you want to do, but people who do that do get results. So I think you've got two things there to look at. The clothes could be reminding something of what was there. So it could be it was haunted by somebody who was, recognised that suit or something. Yeah. Or the clothes themselves have that link, which again you're picking up all the links, and you'll find that when these things start opening up in your head, they start cascading. So it's like, one voice fed many voices. So, the first one might have been a strong one to get through to you and spit on a little bit in your head to say, be aware of me. And then because it drew a line, then all the others jump through as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I seriously think that was the case. I'd love to just sit in there and because my mother-in-law used to do psychometry, like just touching pieces of jewelry and stuff and getting messages that way. And she seemed to be quite effective. And now she doesn't need that because she's doing it on her own. But yeah, it's interesting that it's like an attachment, isn't it? It's a bit like the layers of your wallpaper. I feel like there's something going on there as well.
Yeah. I mean, you can break the link. I mean, again, it's. I mean, I'm a bit coy. When I was first learning all this stuff, I was, let's get this occult thing. I had this bracelet made by Andrew Crumbly, all these bits and pieces. I've all cleared away since. But nowadays, I'm a bit iffy about it because I don't like other energies into my house. So anything I bring in new, I put in a box of salt, just a plastic Tupperware container, Tesco salt. Cover that up as you can. It depends what it is. If it's corroded by salt, I wouldn't do it. But I'd find another way. But then just leave it in there for 3 or 4 days, and that tends to clear any attachments. But then if you've got a room of clothes, no one's going to do that to clothes, and even laundering clothes doesn't really clear them out properly. And it's fair best when I've been laundered. If someone had a suit and they died, and then there's a suit in the cupboard, you're not necessarily going to launder it if it's clean. You might just put it on display in that room.
Yeah.
So all we can do is speculate of these things, but there are ways to clear things, and I think it's a good advice if you're bringing it into your own home to clear things.
That's true. Yeah.
If it's somebody else's home, I'm okay to investigate it because it's not my problem then.
All right, we have a question here. There we go. And you can read that from your end, right? So I'll let you read.
So
And everybody else
Paranormal UK.
can too.
Yep. Okay. Paranormal UK Network. Hello. Do you think a location that has occult links is more likely to respond to occult ritual work on an investigation? I think that's definitely a yes. It's like the more something is done, the more almost like it imprints upon a location. So it doesn't mean you can't take a completely new version site and do a ritual and get something. But if you've got a site where something was done all the time, over and over and over again, then you're going to find that's going to be easier to activate and switch on. And so get things working there. I mean, as I say, I'm going to Hellfire Cave soon. Certainly there's stories about some fairly decadent rituals put down by Francis Dashwood and so on at the time, but very back in the depths of the caves, yeah? So I think that would be quite an easy place to activate. Whereas if you look at, say, another place which has never been used, say a piece of woodland, for example, it's maybe some woodland has been used, of course, people do go out into woods, other places might have never been done. Doesn't mean you can't do something here. It'll certainly get attention, but it's if it's done regularly, that it'll get more attention.
Oh, excellent. And he says, that's what I was thinking about this summer. Okay, so he's got another comment here. About the army uniform. That's interesting.
One member of a team dressed as an army uniform in Colchester, and that place certainly responded. Yeah, it's been many years since I've been there. I've been there 3 or 4 times. I think late 90s, early 2000s again. I lived in St Albans at the time. And yeah, I mean, you got that very long tunnel with rooms coming off there. And yeah, I mean, it's atmospheric there, it's strange. Certainly, we've never done it of costume, but going down there, but the tunnel was haunted. I can't deny that. Mists used to rise and fall about, which is probably a humidity thing. But again, it responds, doesn't it? It does it when you're wanting it to, yeah?
Yeah, that's
But yeah, I
true.
think that would have definitely worked and, encouraged things to manifest in one way or another.
So you said something about you were talking about certain things that you use, and you mentioned the Ouija board. So do you actually you use the Ouija board, or you don't use the Ouija board?
I do use the Ouija boards.
You do, and you're not worried about all the it's really bad and stuff like that.
I'm not worried about it because I use it in a very magical sense, and we do it with protection and magic around. Now, back in the very distant past, when I really didn't know what I was doing, and we're talking 96, 97, something like that, yeah. Used the Ouija boards again in quite a made-up way. We're getting results. It was very It wasn't even a board. It was all letters and numbers written on little squares of paper around a table or the glass. It wasn't even a board. Yeah. Um, oh yeah, I know Ian H. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Ouija boards. Oh yes, Ian, yes, I remember now. Sorry. Yeah, I remember now. Ian did do that. Yeah. Yeah. Second letter of Slim is E, isn't it? So it's that Ian. Yeah. HEU. Yeah. Um. Okay. Yeah. I think it was Ian doing that. I do remember now. Yeah. But to Ouija boards, early on, which is a very basic, paper, glass Ouija boards, and we're getting results. We're getting things where we're calling things, and we're using magic on that. So very simple elemental magic, opening up quarters, and then just from the west, pulling in spirits with them. We're all calling them through, yeah. And we had the last session I did for a very long time. It was quite scary at the time, and we each of us called a spirit through. Four of us were there. I was the last one, and I called my guide, and I was going through quite an arrogant, cocky phase at the time. And I was getting stuff out of a board that was moving. And the three other people I've known for years and years and years, no one was cheating or moving it. It was moving through, we call it the ideomotor effect, how our muscles are subconsciously doing it. No doubt about that. But we're not controlling what it's doing. It's something else was controlling the movement. Anyway, I asked it what was going on. I asked it for information. I was getting basically garbage out of it. I couldn't make sense of it, but it certainly was happening. So I sort of said, can you come into my dreams and give me more information that way? Which is something you should never, ever, ever do. Yeah, the stupidest thing I could possibly do, actually.
Yes.
Anyway, we finished up, cleared up, whatever. Everyone felt fine, and we went home and stuff. I went home that night. It was a Sunday, and yeah, I woke up that night with about a sequence of about 8 or 9 sleep catalepsy hack attacks. Yeah, now I know that the brain switches off the body when you go to sleep, so you don't activate your dreams. But it also happens. There's a spooky component to that as well. Yeah, and then when you've got the presence coming over you, and this big black mass and you can't move, it's not a very good thing, right? So you kept breaking it, waking up, and whatever. And I tried with little things I knew at the time. I couldn't break it at all. And I basically went on to sort of see somebody the next day who knew what to do, and they showed me how to clear things like that. But yeah, it wasn't my brightest move at all, right? So I didn't really touch them for quite a long time. Anyway, more recently, I'm involved with a coven, and Ben, we're doing it regularly as a magical process. We do a proper thing. We decide what we're going to do first of all, and we know how to guard our speech now, not say stupid things that come into your head, right? And it's a really stupid thing to say on a Ouija board, yeah. And then you sort of you learn by making mistakes, yeah. And we sort of open up, and we have the Ouija board we have is one made. It's a magical consecrated item. It's got an actual sigil on it, which actually opens up and closes the doorway. So we put the glass over that, call what we're calling in, and then we'll all touch the glass lightly, when it moves and so on. And it's got the sigil. It's got the letters, the numbers, the yes, no, and the usual stuff. And the first spirits which normally come through is some of the passed on members of the coven themselves, and they sort of talk to us a little bit. And then other ones come through. We might want to call somebody and ask for some help. And then when we're done, it goes back on the sigil, and that closes it, and then we're all clean. So we're doing it a very tightly controlled way. One person always steps back and writes, while the other 4 or so, depends who's there, will be touching the glass. So we keep it in a very clean, controlled way. If we're taking it to a site, we didn't do this in Shepperton Manor, but we're talking about doing it in Hellfire Caves. We'll do it in that way. So we're keeping a very strong filter as to what can come through and what won't come through. So I'm not saying don't do it, but I say do it very carefully and do know what you're doing.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
And just a little bit of talk about the bornness ritual.
Okay. It's called a bornness ritual from Crowley. It's actually if it goes back to the original term, it's called the headless ritual, the headless rite, which goes back to early 0 AD, 1 AD, whatever it's called, Alexandria. And it's a way to get in touch. There's various versions of it floating around. The one I used was, I think, put together by Jack Strutt in Kent originally. And then a change was made into it. A few additions were made by Gordon White from Moon Soup, who added some elemental things to it. So I tend to use that one, but there are other ones around. I mean, you can Google different versions of it. And it's a matter of really, you have your table, you have a candle for each of the elemental quarters, and you have certain names and phrases in English translations of Alexandrian, and you call those through. And with a bit of energy work, and the inner work is you're passing energy back and you're raising energy and so on. So when we did that last, which was the link to fairy we had, is I was with my ex at the time, and she was staying the weekend. And if you go down behind my house, there's the kitchen behind me, and then there's a garden, and then there's a fence, and then there's a lot of woodland, and and a river, yeah. The Blind Yo, it's called, and it just goes out to the Sea of Clevedon. It's about a 2-mile walk that way, yeah. And we went down there, walked through the woods, and there's always a sense of something there. And my partner at the time, she was saying, "There's something here, you're feeling it." And then you realise you're feeling it all the time, you're just not always aware of it. But when you notice it, you tune into it, yeah. So we sort of did that. Okay, that's cool. And we spoke to it a little bit there. And again, it's hard to say spoke to it because it's not like a conversation, but it's you talk to it and see how you feel, yeah. I sort of made a promise to come back, a week or so later and clean up some of her litter there and so on, which I did do. Just that bag, one of those hand sticks to sort of ping things in. I cleaned a load of litter out actually. It's quite a lot because there's a lot of in the summer you get like kids with receiving nitrous oxide canisters down there and so on. Yeah, so there's a lot of rubbish down there. Beer cans and stuff like that. So my partner was there, and that evening we planned to do the Bournemouth ritual, literally just next to where I'm sitting here now, just in my living room. So we cleared the space away. Had the back door open because cats in and out. It was a hot July, and we did the ritual. And then at the end of the ritual, you could feel the woodland, about I don't know, less than a quarter of a mile away. You could feel it just come alive, and somehow it must have lit up what we're doing, and you feel sense. And again, I don't see visually often, but you almost see three spirits like little ents to me, right? But walking across the field to my garden and then standing outside the back door and just reaching their branches in, yeah. And it was a really powerful experience. I thought, this is cool.
Cool.
They didn't come in at the time. Like, I don't know why they didn't. I can't be sure. I think it was because I had one of those protection talismans I mentioned previously above the back door. I've taken them down now. But it was definitely there. It was definitely a wholesome experience. I go down there quite a lot. I leave offerings, all clean, biodegradable stuff. So if I'm leaving incense, I put a gloss stick because it will burn away apart from a little stick, which will rot. Or take food and stuff, for foxes down there, get some really nice bits of cake sometimes, I'm sure, and occasionally sprinkle a little bit of mead or, a spirit just as a hello. So there's definitely a resonance there. And it's like, it's again, it's not, I can't use it to do things for me, but I can go there and say hello. And when I go there, sometimes I get a strong sense of, go away, not tonight, we're busy. And I've gone and had a little look in and I thought, yeah, no, I've really got to go away, leave them alone for this, like, off we go, It's fine, it's not aggressive, it's not having to go at me, it's just said, not tonight, sorry, I'm busy, yeah. Other times you go there, it feels really welcoming, it feels really nice. And it's a way of building up that relationship. And then you sort of find out as you go down there, it's a really strange place because it feels alive. So when you first go into this bit of woodland, there's various little coppices of woodland. But it's getting connected now because the council's putting more trees out, so it might be one longer piece over the next few years as they grow. But you go into this little place, and it's like one side you got the river, but you go down the pathway, and there's a four-way crossroad with a big tall male tree, I call it, a very tall tree, which was like the male guardian of the place, yeah? You go down this path, and then there's like 2 hazel trees, which feel female, and that's right next to a 3-way crossroad, which is really good, like Hecate work, stuff like that, yeah? And then you go all the way down, and it's about, I don't know, 2/3 of a mile down, and you get to where you're literally slap bang against the M5. You can throw a stone and hit a car if you did that close, yeah. But there's a fence there and some trees, and it's in a hollow. And for years and years, it felt really, really, really dark there, not very nice at all. So I went over a friend a couple of years ago, and we put road opener. There's another crossroads down there, just a natural, 4-way where the path breaks, yeah. And we just put road opener on each of the doorways on all the entrances of the paths. And when we come back a month later, it completely cleared. And it's like things were almost coming off a motorway as if it was a river and getting trapped down there, and it was mutating them. And then the road opener just cleared it all out, and we just went our own way again. So it's definitely, you build a rapport up of that. And then what started with that was that Bournemouth ritual, which, had it all opened up.
Wow, that's cool.
And
Very
I
interesting.
call it a Bournemouth out of habit. It's the first way I've read about it. But yeah, but it's more properly called the headless.
Yeah, I know it as the Bournemouth ritual, not
Yeah.
not the other one. But yeah, I might have to look into that. Yeah, that's it. Well done. Yes, that was so interesting. Thank you so much for a very entertaining evening again. I love it.
I'm happy to come back and
But
talk about other things one of these days.
oh
So
yes,
yeah, thank you.
please.
Yeah,
Yeah, as always, I like everybody to come on again whenever you feel like it. So yeah, give us a shout, give us a little text, and we'll get you back on again, definitely. And I will try and get to this Hellfire Club. That would be flipping amazing.
I'll drop you a link in a bit, but yeah, yeah.
Yes. So we're going to put a couple of links in the description of the video. Go on, what's going on? Oh, there is.
Yeah.
The link went up for a second. Yes. And everybody's saying thank you, and they're all off. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paolo, and we will see you again. Yes. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Bye for
Cool.
now. Thank
Talk to you
you.
later. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me again, and the monthly mystical. It's certainly turning out to be a great year of talks this year. So please do like and subscribe. Don't forget to like. I'm a bit not on my full form, as you may have gathered, just because of what's happened this week. But yes, please do like and subscribe to the channel. There's going to be tons more. Again, we're going to have another talk with Paolo. I can't remember what's coming up. What's coming up? We definitely got one. We're going to talk about the connections between masonry and magic, and there's loads more. But I will give you all a shout out when it comes closer to the times. So please do like and subscribe and share with everyone. I will link this up again tomorrow, and I'll put all the links in the descriptions. And I hope to see you all soon. Have a fabulous, magical evening, and thank you all so much for joining. See you all soon. Bye for now.